How about housing for everybody? All right, let's talk about the Democratic debate last night. And now housing, the word housing has finally entered the 2020 presidential race. That's today's show. Let's dive into it. Well, the word housing finally entered the 2020 presidential race. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, Democrats took the gloves off at their 147th debate last night. They scratched, they clawed at each other. These usually sort of unwatchable debates had a newcomer, former New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Now, my favorite exchange featured the rookie and Senator Bernie Sanders. Watch this and enjoy.
Senator Sanders, what did you mean that you don't think they should exist?
Tell you what I mean.
What did that mean?
We have a grotesque and immoral distribution of wealth and income. Mike Bloomberg owns more wealth than the bottom 125 million Americans. That's wrong. That's immoral. That should not be the case when we got 500,000 people sleeping out on the street, when we have kids who cannot afford to go to college, when we have 45 million people dealing with student debt. We have enormous problems facing this country, and we cannot continue seeing a situation where in the last 3 years, billionaires in this country saw an $850 billion increase in their wealth. Congratulations, Mr. Bloomberg. But the average American last year saw less than a 1% increase in his or her income. That's wrong.
Mayor Bloomberg, should you exist?
I can't speak for all billionaires. All I know is I've been very lucky, made a lot of money, and I'm giving it all away to make this country better. And a good chunk of it goes to the Democratic Party as well.
Is it too much? Have you earned too much money? Has it been an obscene amount of... Should you have earned that much money?
Yes. I worked very hard for it, and I'm giving it away.
Ouch. Nice comeback. All right, well, with that out of the way, let's talk some housing now, because this is going to have a big impact on investors. So let's talk about this Bloomberg versus Buttigieg versus Sanders. Now, mayors Mike Bloomberg and Pete Buttigieg, along with Senator Bernie Sanders, rolled out competing plans for America's affordable housing crisis. Let's start with Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who rolled out a huge platform this week, and he's criticized the Trump administration for rolling back a lot of those big regulations on banks. Those were signed into law in 2018, rolling some of that stuff back. The former mayor is tired of watching Freddie and Fannie date for so long without getting married. So his solution has the two mortgage companies merging in wedded bliss. And we're open to some name suggestions around here. I'm pulling for Fannie Pack. So he wants to merge these two. But his plan goes deeper for housing. Listen to this. He wants to toughen those stress tests of the country's largest financial institutions and give the Fed more power to judge them. Republicans aren't going to like that. He wants to reinstate annual living wills. That's where large financial institutions must explain how they could go bankrupt without harming sort of the broader economy. And then he wants to also make those documents public so we can all read them. And he also wants to restore the Volcker, that's hard to say, the Volcker rule. Do you remember the Volcker rule? Do you remember this thing? Of course, this was part of the Dodd-Frank law, and this prohibited big banks from basically investing in things using your deposits. They couldn't invest in hedge funds and other things that would make them profitable, and instead separated it. Well, in 2018, that was rolled back under the Trump administration. So he wants to restore the Volcker rule and make enforcement more effective. He also wants to monitor risks outside of the system, like those insurance companies. So Mayor Buttigieg, on the other hand, wants to help keep Fannie Pack separated. He wants to keep them separated. His plan, though, looks like this. Here's how it kind of breaks down. He wants to have increased affordable housing. He wants to have equal access to affordable 30-year fixed-rate mortgages for working families. And he wants to combat discrimination and predatory lending practices. Beyond that, Buttigieg wants the government to shell out $4 billion for a first-time homebuyer program, and that would help cover those down payments for those that qualify. Now, Senator Bernie Sanders, this is where the money's talking right now. He wants housing for everybody with a price tag of $2.5 trillion. Now, to his credit, Bernie Sanders was the first to speak about this over the summer. He told the New York Times back then, he said, for too long, this is one of those issues that we just don't talk about. All right, so his plan, you ready for this? It's big, it's pricey. He wants to build and rehabilitate 7.4 million affordable housing units across the country and build 2 million mixed income units. He wants to have a national rent control standard. Did you hear that, landlords? A national rent control standard. And end homelessness, he wants. and he wants to fund fully those Section 8 vouchers. And flippers, if you're watching right now, you better watch out for Sanders, because his plan includes a 25% house flipping tax to anyone that flips a house for profit within 5 years of having rehabilitated the house. So that would basically end house flipping. Because, right now, right, if you want to buy a house and flip that house and you want to live in that house for 2 years, you can avoid the capital gains by living in the house for 2 years. Now we'd have a 5-year plan. 5 years. That's huge. And a national rent control standard across the country. We're seeing how this is happening already in cities like Portland, and certain states are actually having statewide rent control plans. So gone would be the days when we would say, hey, this is a landlord-friendly state, or that's a landlord-friendly state. I love to invest in states like Texas and Florida and Tennessee, and very landlord-friendly states. If there's a national rent control standard, then Washington, D.C. is going to tell me how much I'm allowed to rent my apartment for, or rent my properties out for. In addition to that national rent control standard, the Sanders administration would also invest $32 billion over 5 years to combat homelessness, including support for outreach services. And he'd also aim to build 25,000 units in the first year, which would be a $26 billion investment. And he'd provide $500 million for state and local outreach programs. So there's a lot of talk in Sanders' plan about the government stepping up on affordable house building again, Section 8 vouchers, building, having the government get involved in building and rehabilitating the nation's existing public housing projects. We know how the public housing projects turned out in this country. I would love to see opportunities for outreach to investors or home builders who know what they're doing and are able to build great sort of housing, affordable housing programs that don't look like what the government got involved with a number of years ago. And also have a guaranteed homes proposal. So there's a lot going on here in these plans, but bottom line, we have a housing crisis in this country. We have 25 million units that we need in this country, and we don't have it. You go to California, for instance, there are people who can't commute the 3 hours or 2 hours to get into San Francisco, so they're basically sleeping under overpasses in tent cities. There are tent cities that have popped up outside of San Francisco and Oakland because people can't afford the homes there. And, look, people are spending almost 30% of their take-home pay on rent, and the rent continues to go up, and wages aren't going up with it. So we absolutely have an affordable housing crisis in this country. To his credit, Sanders was out there first speaking about this last summer, and the other candidates on the bandwagon right now. Just looking at Mayor Pete's plan here, I just think it looks a little weak weak in details, let's say, compared to what Mayor Bloomberg is proposing on the regulation side, and definitely weak on details when you compare it to Bernie Sanders' plan. Now, this is all a very interesting play as they head into the Nevada primary, and that's in a very important area that was hit very hard by the housing crisis a number of years ago. And there's a lot of Latino in the Latino population in Nevada that really can't afford the homes. So prices continue to go up, wages continue to stagnate or go up just a little bit, but they're not keeping up. So I'm glad these guys are talking about it. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. Drop me a comment below. How do you think the Democrats are handling the housing crisis? What do you want to hear from them? What things stand out to you? And what do you want to hear from Republicans? What do you want to hear the Trump administration talking about when it comes to affordable housing? I don't hear much of anything coming from the Republican side about the housing crisis in this country. Drop me a comment. I can't wait to hear it. We'll see you next time, everyone.